I spent 3 months working on this wig, and I'm going to do my best to explain how I turned this into a Shadow the Hedgehog cosplay. Sonic character wigs usually come in 2 flavors. The more natural variety that involve like a lot of ombre and like those cute little like curls and stuff you see. And then there's the wigs that focus on like the big shapes that are like much more cartoony and usually require like a lot of base structure to make. I'll talk more about this later, but for now, let's talk about how I put together the clothes for my cosplay. Closet cosplay has pretty much been around since the beginning of cosplay because it's affordable and accessible. And you don't need a sewing machine or dozens and dozens of yards of fancy fashion fabric. You just need the clothes in your closet, some accessories, and a little bit of creativity. For a character like Shadow the Hedgehog, I thought I would do something more casual and bring out like the punk skater vibes. And yes, I know he wears air shoes, not skates, but this is my cosplay and I thought it would look cool. I started putting together the outfit by identifying key parts of what makes Shadow's character recognizable, that being his shoes, his rings, his like chest floof thing, and then his hair, quills, spikes, that jazz. These are crucial parts of the design that make Shadow's character recognizable across many different types of media, and I wanted to include those key design pieces in my own rendition of the character. For the base outfit, I originally wanted to go with like a shorts and leggings combo, but I ended up opting for a pair of like cargo sweatpants instead to make the look more cohesive and, I don't know, flow better. Though the shorts might make a comeback if I decide to take this cosplay to a con because it gets hot. It gets hot in the summer. The top I decided to go with is a... Okay. This is the top I decided to go with. It is a lettuce hem crop top and like altered sweatshirt combo. This used to be a regular sweatshirt that I cut off the bottom and the graphic on, and then I did a fold over hem and I sewed it on with my sewing machine. You don't need a sewing machine to do this. It's completely doable by hand. I used to do like all of my cosplays with hand sewing, which was a little bit crazy, but it's completely doable. You don't need it. You don't need a sewing machine. I also took the time to paint these stripes on the sides of the arms with good old apple barrel paint and fabric paint mixing medium. You do need a lot of layers to make the paint opaque because it's pretty thin, but I think it looks a lot better than if I were to like sew it on because I didn't want to mess with like the cuff. Anyway, I had some leftover black and white fur from a previous project and cut out a piece of the white to whip stitch to the front of the shirt for the tuft of fur on Shadow's chest. And I ended up using the black fur for the tails and ears. The tail was really simple. I just made a long triangle and traced it onto the fabric with the pile or direction of the fur going down the tail. And then I just whip stitched it by hand and pulled the fur out of the seam. To attach the cosplay, I just doubled up a string of embroidery thread and sewed it into the base of the tail so that I could tie it onto my belt. For the inhibitor rings, I opted to make them out of fabric and stuffing rather than 3D printing them, because I do plan on wearing these with my rollerblades, and in the case that I fall, I don't want to break my props, but I also don't want my props to break me, so... I didn't really have a pattern for these, so I just drew some concentric circles and cut out a section so that I would be able to stuff them with polyfill and sew the ends together. I did sew this on a machine. Again, you don't need a sewing machine to do this. It is completely doable by hand. Just having a machine makes it a lot nicer. The first draft was thin and too large for my wrist, so I just altered my sketch by making it a little bit larger on the outside and decreasing the diameter of the circle in the center, and repeated the same steps that I did for the first one. I really don't have a lot of instructions to give you for this besides just trial and error, and don't be afraid to mess up. The second ring turned out much better, and with that completed, I only had two things left: the wig and the skates. This part of the cosplay is less closet cosplay and more of just a little fun thing for myself. Back in the ye olde days of the pandemic, I got into rollerblading, specifically aggressive rollerblading. Fast forward to today, and I have a pair of rollerblades just sitting around, and they are perfect for my Shadow the Hedgehog cosplay. Since I would inevitably be taking these skates outside, I wanted the paint job to be a little more permanent, so I opted to use spray paint. But before you even touch the spray paint cans, you need to sand, and sand a lot. The reason you need to sand plastic pieces before you paint them is the surface texture. If your surface is really smooth, your paint might not adhere correctly and it could flake off. Sanding your pieces evens out the surface and provides texture for your paint to stick to and gives you a better finish. This doesn't just apply to spray painting things like plastic skates, it's very much applicable to finishing your 3D prints and other props. Anyway, after sanding down all the pieces I wanted to paint, I taped off the parts that I wanted to spray paint and did light coats, waiting 10 minutes between each coat to avoid the paint dripping. Spray paint is a good option for coloring props fast, but you do need to be aware of a few things. Spray paint will melt things like XPS foam, so be aware of the materials you are painting, as well as the environment in which you'll be painting in. You'll want to be in a well-ventilated area, preferably outside, and you need to wear a respirator when you do this. Unfortunately, I did not sand well enough. Because I did get some flakage on the white and red parts, which is sad, but not unfixable. I ended up sacrificing one of my paintbrushes to touch up the cracked parts, but in the end, it turned out really nice, and I could no longer avoid the inevitable: the wig. Okay, game plan. I'm going to steam the bangs into the front. Since this has like a split hairline and there's no actual bangs, I'm gonna create bangs. And then I'll crimp the entire thing with my miniature crimper because I was dumb and I didn't buy a full crimper. And then I'll see what happens then. Will I cut all the hair off this wig? Will I not? Who knows? So I didn't end up cutting off all the hair and I haven't crimped it yet. I'll try to explain my thought process a bit here, since the wig community is still very much like vague. I'm really just working off of techniques that I've seen other people use, and I'm using sort of a combination of old school and new school techniques in order to make this wig. I did use a garment steamer to move the bangs into the front. The wig I bought, which was a cheap $18 Amazon wig, has a really heavy center part. Like, I don't know if you can see it. There's a heavy center part in there. Using the garment steamer helps change the part because it heats up the fiber and allows you to manipulate the hair before it cools down and takes shape again. And it's also a very helpful tool that I ended up using a lot. So, garment steamer for the win. A lot of popular cosplay wig makers these days use some sort of base shape or form or structure for their like large shaped wigs. And from analyzing short form tutorials that don't actually tell you what they use, I think maybe it's upholstery foam, but I don't have access to upholstery foam because it's expensive. It's expensive. You could also use like wire and packing tape or cardboard. I've done the wire and packing tape before with my Rika wig, but I didn't even want to wrap my head around trying to like create a 3D wire armature for Shadow's spikes. So yeah. And I didn't exactly like my skills with cardboard aren't exactly amazing, so I can't really get the same curve that I wanted with my cardboard sculpting skills. So I opted to use the good old-fashioned teasing method and combined it with crimping and the steamer. The first thing I did was section off the parts of the hair into the bangs, the top spikes, the bottom spikes, and the center spikes. And I cut the hair a little bit longer than I would want the spikes to be because crimping and styling makes the length of the fiber shorter. And I kept that extra hair off to the side to use later. Next up is crimping the hair. Crimping the hair gives it texture so that the hairspray can like adhere to it more, and it makes it easier to style in the long run. So basically I went through and crimped each section of the wig with my miniature crimper, and it took me forever. Okay, so just for reference, this right here is uncrimped hair. This right here is hair right after it's been crimped. And then this is the hair after it's been crimped and brushed out once very gently. This is where the teasing comes into play. Once I had a section of hair crimped and brushed out, I took a fine-tooth comb and started back combing until I got a ball of hair. I hit that with some hairspray and a blow dryer to set it, and then you have the beginnings of a spike. Your first instinct would be to brush down like you're detangling, but that's going to take out all of the texture that I just put into the wig. So instead, I pulled up with the brush and did a little bit of sculpting with my hands to kind of get it into that general spike shape. And at this point, the shape was starting to look better, but it still needed some work. So I broke out my handy dandy steamer once again. This part is just pure trial and error, fiddling with things until I was happy, and using the steamer really smoothed out the shape. The only thing to be wary about with the steam is that it's hot and you could burn your fingers, so be careful. And if you don't have a traditional garment steamer, you can use those like steamer iron combo things. Those work too. You just have to be extra careful because it essentially triples the surface area of which to burn your delicate little fingers. Once I finished the base shape for all of the spikes, you want to let it sit overnight and dry out because the steam adds water and weight to your wig, which will change the shape of the final product if you glue on the hair too soon. Speaking of the hair, I made glued wefts for this project, and unfortunately I didn't have enough with that excess hair that I cut off earlier, so I had to buy a second 40-inch black wig. It was, again, just a cheap wig from Amazon, and both of them combined was cheaper than a singular Arta wig, but it did suffer on quality in like terms of like the hair fibers, but you work with what you got. And I also harvested some red wefts from one of my other wigs to use for Shadow's stripes. But I didn't use a whole lot of the hair, so that wig is still usable and will probably use for another cosplay. Anyway, once I got the extra hair, I had to make a lot of glued wefts, and making a glued weft isn't actually that difficult. You just take a small amount of hair, make sure it isn't tangled, lay it out on a flat surface, and apply some Uhu glue to the ends. I like to spread it out with a palette knife, but you can use a silicone spatula or anything that you prefer. And there you have it, a glued weft. The real pain is making enough to cover an entire wig. And gluing the hair to the wig is an entirely different story. I didn't get a whole lot of footage of this just because it was already taking a long time, and filming the process makes it take even more time. So have a few videos and pictures and explanations from moi for the process. My first thought was to turn the wig upside down and glue on the hair to the back of the spikes, but it was way more difficult and frankly like a monster to deal with because I don't have one of those fancy wig stands. I have a foam head, a wooden dowel, and some zip ties. So yeah, it ended up being easier just to reach around and glue the hair on with the wig upright. I also had to take a lot of breaks as it was a very laborious process, and I decided to wear a respirator because I did not want to inhale 3 cans of got-to-be glued. As for the order in which I did the spikes, I had no order. It was complete chaos because I thought I was going to run out of hair, But please learn from my mistakes and do the bottom spikes first and then work your way up. It'll make life so much easier. And now is where I explain how I got the hair on the wig. How I do it is I trim the glued part at the top, then I apply Uhu glue to the back of the weft with a palette knife. I place it on the wig where I want it to be. Spray that area with some hairspray, hit it with a blow dryer on low until it's tacky, then you smooth out the hair over the area with the hairspray, and then hit it with even more hairspray. And then one more time with that dryer to lock it in, and bam! You got a glued weft. And I just had to repeat that process over and over and over again until the entire thing was covered. But in the end, I think it was worth it because these spikes are the best I have ever done. But it doesn't end there because I still have the bangs and the ears to do. The bangs were simple because I ended up just crimping it and brushing it out so the texture wasn't as noticeable. And then just thinning it with some thinning shears and styling it once again with my best friend, the garment steamer. For the ears, I cut out triangle shapes with some leftover EVA foam and glued the pieces together with contact cement. I covered the inside of the ear with some plush fabric that was close to my skin tone and the back with the same black fur that I used for the tail. And I stuck it all on with some hot glue. To get the ears to actually stick to my head, I decided to use magnets. Ooh. Okay, so basically I just glued 2 magnets to each ear, one on each end, and I used Uhu glue because if you use hot glue on your magnets, it will ruin them and they will not stick to each other. And as for the other magnets, they got sewn into my wig grip, and with that, everything was completed. And here's the final reveal. Ooh. Wig, everything. Spin around. Yeah, I'm super happy with it. I just might need to like style the bangs back a little bit more if I'm gonna take it to a con. So, but yeah, that was my shadow cosplay. Thanks for watching. This cosplay took a long time to make, and this is my first time putting together a YouTube video, so like and subscribe if you want to see more, and I'll see you on my next adventure. Okay, bye. Okay, so this is the wig after a day of filming and taking photos. It's definitely a little bit beat up, and I did fall into a wall with it, but I say it's pretty good. Still looks pretty good.